I've never seen that before, where the hail was still around the next day. So that was actually,
What, 11 a.m.?
yeah, it was like 11 a.m. the next day, and it was still like 10 inches deep of hail. Yeah, so I have not seen that before actually.
I'm sorry, what time did we stay in?
Tucumcari.
Oh, we did.
I think that's because of the higher elevation, maybe.
For that case, I think it was. That might have been more because of the shading and the depth. So it looked like somehow you had it like drift up high, and then you're shaded by that awning, so it couldn't melt quite as much. Higher elevation could help it where you weren't just having that high temperatures right away. So, say you got that much further east and it like immediately was in the 80s the next day, it's going to melt faster. But that just seemed like it was just a lot of hail, and it probably got wind driven over there just to really pile up. Then again, even the drive yesterday, we saw in open sunlight there's still hail from the day before. So that must have just been a ton of hail for like on the drive to Amarillo. That just must have been a ton of hail out there. So we did our little museum, having lunch, just killing time to try to look at how things are going to play out. For this day, you had really a few targets. There was, I'll zoom out here. It seemed like the favorite target was the one that didn't happen actually. So a lot of people were like down by Roswell. People are excited about Roswell.
Because of the 5%.
I don't know, I guess because SPC had the 5% there, but it's like, no.
Area 51 abducted it.
So even if meteorologically we weren't particularly excited by this, we weren't really sure why there would be a storm down here. And even if there was, you've got this triangle out here of just no roads.
Yeah.
So we don't think this is the best risk area. And even if it was, there aren't really roads out here. So I don't know what you'd do with that. So if you get a storm here, if it moves out into this box, well, you're stuck. You're not going to be able to see it. Then you had another one where it looked like, same area as last night. Something coming off the terrain over here could develop and drift slowly southeastward. Maybe some drift this way, maybe it'll drift generally in this direction. You could have went way out west.
Which is where a lot of the action is.
Yeah, catching the terrain, storms right off the terrain here. For the out west, the risk is, depending where these storms went, you have very few roads. So that was a case of, you can actually see it on here, where generally we'll lean towards, trying to, maximize the chance of seeing something. If we have a storm in this area, there's a lot of roads here we can chase with. If there's a storm out here, not only do we have terrain, we also have very limited major roads. With your storm motion going southeast, now this ended up happening. It did track favorably along 285, but this is a lot of luck for that to happen. So if your storm was too far to the north, you've got a couple crosses and then no way to see it. You really needed the storm to form just north of the 60/285 north of Encino, or else you don't really have a way to chase out here. That did happen, so for the chasers that took this gamble, they were rewarded with it. So they got the storm that tracked right along this road by Encino. But for us, we were thinking, hey, 2 to 3 hours to head out west with the risk that the storm ends up somewhere where there's no way to chase it with terrain. Since there's other options, we're not going to gamble on that. This one gave a brief rope tornado early, and then you had, same issues elsewhere, just a lot of cold air coming in. You got your structure and whatnot, but whoever is out there, I think it was probably only like a minute, so you had like a minute window with a brief rope tornado out here. So those people that were on 60 out here by Encino were able to see that. And then afterwards, this just kind of fizzled out, didn't do much. So we opted for this one. So down here, we didn't think there was going to be a storm anyway. If there was, we wouldn't have gone here because of the road network. So we stuck with this area, better road network. Area we're actually familiar with too, that's something helpful. Hey, we just drove through all of this, we know the conditions up recently. As far as level of excitement, not as optimistic as the day before. We were looking at temperatures and dew points, and it was a lot colder. So your inflow air going into the storm was quite a bit colder than the day before. Still had enough moisture for there to be severe weather, but it was more at the lower end where there was some obvious problems with the setup. So we were out here, we went out a little bit to the west, we were thinking, well, maybe we go to Santa Rosa and head to our bets. As the stuff comes off the terrain further, we could jump on it. If something actually does happen down here, we can drop down this way after it. Or if something forms generally in this area where we think it's going to form, we've got these east options and we're essentially right there. Instead of sitting around doing nothing in the middle of nowhere, we're like, hey, let's do the balloon launch and get an actual look at what's going on in the atmosphere.
And we do that balloon launch in Santa Rosa?
No, so we did it in exit 311, Montoya. I'll try to find it on here.
The way you remember this thing.
So where was that? It's small. I don't even know if it's going to show up on here.
Well, in between.
Here it is. Yeah. So here's Montoya.
Montoya Cemetery.
Montoya Cemetery. So right about there.
Yeah, the T4 ranch
Yep.
that we tried to drive up.
So yeah, we tried to go up here. This is just a ranch. We went eastbound a little bit on old Route 66, found an open enough area to do the balloon launch. Now to zoom out to show, why here in particularly, I'll put the little dot on it. So we had our, somewhere in this vicinity is where we did our balloon launch. You had the earlier storms would be coming off the terrain over here like this. You had an area that we expected for development somewhere out over here. So we were doing this balloon launch early afternoon to see, well, number one, are the conditions truly favorable for storms to start here? If the storms start, what type of environment are we looking at? And this is also downstream of this. So as these storms from the west move in, this will give us some hint of what the environment will look like. This is where we ran into, probably the worst technical problems of the trip. So we got our launch went off flawlessly. That was one of the fastest launches I've been a part of. But then for the plotting program, we had all sorts of issues getting the sharp high version. So we had our base sounding, so we had temperature, dew point, the winds. But to calculate things like CAPE and whatnot, we were having technical issues, which was pretty frustrating. So I really wanted to talk about that in detail with everyone on the version you're used to, instead of being like, hey, draw it yourself, and then, you don't know the number. Like, I didn't want to do that on the road. It would have been too tough to really go through. But David and me were working in two separate ways for an hour and a half trying to get it to work. The poor data was not helping, so we were trying to download things to make this happen. So that was an unfortunate part. So I know I was kind of sorry to Van too, but it was hey, I'm going to tell you about this, and then we're working for an hour and a half trying to figure out how to make the stupid thing work.
Don't worry, Natalie got it for us.
Yeah, and then then I look back and I'm like, why didn't you tell me you drew it? Because Natalie was is this right? And I'm like, yeah, that's all perfect. Why did we could have used that? Because she was back there, she just plotted it by hand and did it all for us.
What were you struggling with though? Just being able to share it?
So the SharpPy version, where it calculates everything for you, something was wrong with the website. So usually we upload our data to the website and it plots that version. So something was wrong with the website where it wasn't working.
Oh, okay.
So then we were going to just download that whole programming software onto one of our computers. We just